Moving on to number 4, the fourth best area in the Greater Toronto Area and the City of Toronto with regards to the Toronto condo market and the rental market for cash flow and rental income purposes. Today's video, I'm going to go through the top 5 areas for cash flow and rental income purposes according to the Toronto real estate and Toronto condo market as of May 2021. Hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Realtron Realty Inc. As always, you can find my contact information in the description box with regards to my Gmail, my Instagram, and my office. Feel free to go to my Instagram and give me a follow and get in touch with me with any questions you have via my contact info in the description box. Lastly, please, if you wish to do so, subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Your support in that regard is much appreciated. However, you don't have to do it. Feel free not to subscribe, not to review, and not to like. Anyways, let's put that all aside and get to the point of today's video, which is the top 5 areas in the City of Toronto and the Greater Toronto Area for cash flow and rental income purposes. Now let's set the table first. Let's set the parameters and the scope of the context around these numbers. First, I assumed 20% down. Then I assumed a holding of 2 years. The investment window is 2 years. You're gonna liquidate and sell in 2 years. For the average sold prices I used for this calculations, for the IRR and the cap rate, I used the April numbers. In this video, I used the IRR formula and the cap rate formula to determine which areas are the best. In other words, I used those 2 metrics to rank these areas in order from least desirable to most desirable in terms of rental income. Not familiar with the cap rate metric / formula or the IRR metric / formula. In the past, I made a video on the cap rate one. In the future, I will probably make a video on the IRR one. There's a link in the description for a quick cursory explanation of them. But shortly put, the IRR is the internal rate of return, which measures a potential real estate investment's profitability. This metric takes into account initial investment costs, cash flow, and potential sales, or rather potential proceeds from sales in the future. So it's represented in a percentage form, and the larger the percentage, usually the better. Now, this is not the be all or end all. Once again, this is just merely one metric to be used in amalgam and in conjunction with a bunch of other metrics and your gut feeling sometimes, your instincts as well. So this is not the be all end all, but for this video, we need to have a criteria, right? The reason it's important for you to know these parameters is because this is just a video meant for the general public, for people who are curious and interested, who are thinking about investing, or maybe not, they're just naturally curious. But when I speak to clients on a one-to-one basis, for your specific scenario, most likely not, but it could be the case depending on if you're going to put more down, more less down, if you're going to occupy the unit yourself for a few years, then rent it out, if your period of time of holding onto the investment is longer than 2 years. All these things can factor in. Thus, as a result, when I talk to clients on a one-to-one basis, maybe the ranking for them, that what's areas that are best for them, won't be exactly mapped onto the ranking for this video. This is once again meant for the general public at large, right? So anyways, having said all that and the important prefaces aside, let's get to the list. Number 5, the municipality of Markham. Coming in at a IRR rate of 9.08% and a cap rate of 3.10% based on the most recent sales data and the most recent lease data. Markham rounds out the list at number 5. The average purchase price within the last month was $694,000 and the average lease price was $2,024. Markham, along with Richmond Hill and Vaughan, with regards to the York region, are the areas where there's the most inventory in terms of condominiums, and as a result, you have the most condominium transactions there on the purchase and sale side of things and the lease side of things. Now, compared to Vaughan and Richmond Hill, its York region counterparts, the average selling price here is much higher, thus asking and requiring for initial cost of investment much more than, once again, Vaughan and Richmond Hill. Now, one key thing to keep in mind, as I always say, is that this criteria is very specific criteria, right? And it doesn't also, in terms of when we look at average prices at a simple metric such as that, we don't account for different property types, right? We can look at the average for 2 bedrooms and the average for 1 bedroom, as I do on other videos on this channel. But for the purposes of today's video, you have to understand the averages we're using is based on across all bedroom numbers and washroom numbers, right? Moving on to number 4, the fourth best area in the Greater Toronto Area and the City of Toronto with regards to the Toronto condo market and the rental market for cash flow and rental income purposes. Number 4 is North York. coming in at a IRR rate of 9.98% and a capitalization rate of 3.29%. So marginally better than number 5, which is once again Markham. Now here the initial cost of investment is less than Markham. Now you may ask yourself why, because it's in North York, a very central area. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the municipality of Toronto, has better, easier access to transportation. Well, the thing about North York is that the average prices of C15, which when I account for North York, what constitutes North York, the definition I use is the C7, C14, and C15. That's really, to me, the central, that's the central North York, really, to me, right? Some people, you can say C6 as well, right? Point being, the prices of C15 kind of drag down the averages here because C15 has a lot of newer builds, a lot of smaller condos, and it's further east, less central than C7, C14. So the sheer number of units available in terms of C15 and C14 and C7 kind of bring down the averages here. The monthly rent came in at $2,065. So more than the previous entry on this list, number 5, but the initial cost of investment on average is much less. Next up, number 3, the third best area for rental income and cash flow purposes for real estate investors of condominiums in the Toronto real estate market in 2021 is Vaughan, coming in at a IRR rate of 10%, more specifically 10.52%. And a capitalization rate of 3.4%. In terms of rental income purposes, here we see very healthy amounts at $21.49. So meaning the average cost of rent here is $2,149 within the last 10 days. The cost of investment here is less than Markham, but more than North York, coming in at $675,000. Next up, and in my opinion, number 2, obviously, next up, number 2, but in my opinion, before I reveal this, this is the best area. Even though according to this specific criteria, it comes in at number 2, but factoring all the other metrics and all the other things that are not accounted for in this video, as I said, these metrics I'm using are not the be all and end all. There's more to it. And, since I work for buyers, work for sellers, work for tenants, work for landlords, my experience and knowledge from that on top of what the numbers say, I think constitute this in reality as the number 1 area, but according to this is number 2, and which is Richmond Hill, coming in at an IRR rate of 11.3% and a cap rate of 3.57%. Now the initial cost of investment here is far less than anything we've seen on the list, coming in at $628,000. I'm very, very fond of Richmond Hill. It's a very much so a growing area. A lot of the condominium developments are on Central, meaning it's facing Yonge Street, facing Bathurst Street. They have continuously been revamping the transportation system here, and it is a very, very suburb-like area that in the future is going to be, in my opinion, as I project in 5 to 10 years, is going to be the future North York. It's really honestly going to be just the North York that's a little further north. It's frankly, in my opinion, both for freehold purposes and condominium purposes, for end using perspective and an investment perspective, one of the best areas in the country, I would say. And perhaps I'm biased in that regard, but the fact of the matter is the tenant base here is on average a little bit better than tenant bases around the other areas. Once again, the ratio of the rental income on average and the initial cost of investment, the purchase prices, the average costs of units in this area is great. And I think it should be top of mind for any investors interested in purchasing properties for immediate cash flow, as opposed to potentially waiting 2 years to 3 years to 4 years, occupying it yourself and then renting it down the line. This should be top of mind, but it's number 2 on this list. And moving on to number 1, which is Mississauga, coming in at a staggering 14.52% rate of IRR and a cap rate of 4.26%. Now, once again, the average here, the average purchase price, or AKA for the purposes of this video, the initial cost of investment really is $575,000, so $575,000, so far by far the cheapest on this list. And furthermore, the rental income is a very healthy amount of $2,200 a month on average, once again. Now, the reason the average cost here is a bit low is, once again, sheer number of inventory, right? Naturally, when you have a lot of inventory, is a very populated area with units. What happens usually is that reflects a lesser of a average because you have more one bedrooms, more bachelors, you have more 1+1s, and those kind of drag the average down. Furthermore, what also occurs is Mississauga has a lot of older units. Not to say all these areas we discussed don't have a lot of old buildings and old units, but Mississauga has its fair share of them. And what happens is, once again, 9 times out of 10, a very old condominium, per square foot, they go much less, right? Than its relative comparables that are much newer. So that also has an impact on the average prices. Anyways, that's the list. And what you probably noticed excluded from this list is downtown Toronto, midtown Toronto, and in the future I'll make videos on those. God knows I talk about downtown Toronto enough. But the numbers for Midtown and downtown, specifically downtown, were not good enough to make the top 5 cut. If you have any further questions with regards to the Toronto real estate market or this video, feel free to comment them or get in touch with me. You have my contact information in the description box. Lastly, feel free to subscribe and like if you happen to enjoy this video or my other videos. Stay tuned for another weekly condo market update coming up on Friday. As always, every Friday is a weekly condo market update. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe.